You're now live.
We are live. And we took our break early so that we could have time to digest what we heard. And the thought was it would be good if we talked through if we had goals. We did have Representative Kornheiser in. The goal there, and committee correct me, was that they really wanted to modernize our corporate tax structure and make it more aligned with what's happening nationally and internationally. We heard from the Public Assets Institute, who was fine with everything except going to the sales only structure. They didn't feel that, and they're going to send us information, and we may actually have it from Michael Mazarov, whose documents we've posted, and I haven't had a chance to reread them, that this wasn't a big factor in whether corporations stayed or left. We also heard that by a large majority of corporations, the vast majority, pay the minimum tax, that very few, but that these are very erratic. And if you've ever sat through the economic presentations for the revenue forecast, a couple of years ago, we started getting big corporate tax payments, and we weren't sure why. And they thought it was probably the repatriation in the Jobs and Tax Act, but we weren't quite sure we wanted to spend it until we found out if they were going to figure out if they wanted to take it back. But sometimes corporations if they don't owe a tax, they let whatever they've paid in ride for a couple of years in case they owe something in year 3 or 4, and then they'll ask for a refund, and you'll see where there's a big jump because we have a major corporate return to file, and it will have an impact on revenue. So they can be erratic, not the same kind of predictability you get with probably personal income tax. So committee thoughts, reflections. Senator Bray, do you have thoughts? I guess you did.
I mean, just to restart the conversation. So I had said, coming into the room, particularly based on the financial health of the state, I wasn't thinking of us as having any kind of mission the way that sometimes we do, of raising a certain amount of money to support appropriations that are generally been agreed to by the two bodies. And so my take was that we were focusing on modernization, and that we probably bring an eye towards greater fairness to the work, something like that. But overall, our work, without making it an explicit goal at the outset, was that it was going to be revenue neutral. And then I asked that question because I think some of where we go on some of the openings available to us will be guided by, are we trying to increase revenues to the state, or are we just trying to raise the same amount of money in a more equitable manner, that kind of thing.
Okay. And I will say, I spent yesterday morning with my local mental health agency. It was Mental Health Day at the State House. And we have chronically and this morning it was the child and family centers, and we have chronically underfunded because of lack of revenue, our home and community-based services. And I don't think anyone denies that. I know that APROPS recognizes it. So it's not that we couldn't use the revenue. But you're right, this year we are not facing a shortage.
Right. Well, and if I could have one quick last thing, and that is just that I recognize too that a temporary surge of money could disguise a chronic shortfall. So I don't mean to imply that our base level of funding across the board, for instance, mental health or other areas, has been adequate. And so we might say, take the ARPA money out of the picture. Just how are we doing on our steady state budgeting and revenues?
That's the presentation we got the other day from, Catherine Benham. No, it wasn't. It was Sarah Clark. Okay, Senator Pearson and then Senator McDonald.
Well, I would just say I wish I had a strong feeling. Senator Bray said a more just system. I wish I had a strong feeling of what accomplished that, but in terms of these questions, because it's pretty murky to me. But I definitely would not support something that was losing revenue overall. I don't need it to balance out to zero, but I'm also not, looking for new revenue. But if we had to only err on one side, it would be to make sure we were not losing money in whatever package. And perhaps Senator McDonald's question is more relevant than this, but just to flag it, Madam Chair, you seem to have had some thoughts about the cloud tax, and I wonder if you could share that with us, because that is also part of this package.
Well, the cloud tax got attached to this because I was told it would raise revenue, and it was, sent to offset it. But it is not in any way attached to it. I mean, it's been sent to us before. And I'm just looking, I had hoped that we could go through this. The cloud tax raises another whole bunch of issues. And I think we do have to look at it in fairness to the other body, but I don't think it needs to be done in conjunction with this. If we want to do it in conjunction with this, we can. It's picking up a new revenue source. We have discussed it several times, and it has never been an easy discussion. And so the one thing that's changing is that when we started, I think there were 3 or 4 states that were doing it. Now there's 21 or 28. So it's moving up, but maybe that'll turn out to be to our advantage at some point. Maybe TurboTax will move here. And I know, Senator Sorokin, have you had the discussion we did about a corporation? I believe Wikipedia was the thing that has no physical nexus anywhere, and having a tax on, it's up there with cryptocurrency, but that was brought up at one point in economic development. Wave of the future.
Well, that would be a good tax to look at.
Yes.
Talk about being in the clouds.
That's exactly where it was.
Well,
okay.
So Madam Chair, I was going to raise the issue of the cloud tax as well. And you said, in fairness to the other body, we would have to consider it, for instance, in a conference committee.
No.
But then, well, so are we saying here that if that's where people want to go in the House, I would just walk, or do we talk to them in advance saying, if we're going to pass this corporate tax, we want to make sure that it's not going to come back to bite us on the cloud tax?
They have sent us the cloud tax, I think 3 times. We took testimony on it once and could not get any oomph to to get it over the finish line. They sent it back to us. I've been told they've sent it to us 5 times and we haven't taken it up. I told the chair I would, since we started early this year, I would take it up. But they attached it, I think, so that to get rid of the issue of lost revenue. And last year, the estimate was, I think, higher for lost revenue. And because they want us to take it up, they want it. But we don't have to deal with it in the context of this bill. We can choose, we can stick it on miscellaneous tax, which is usually where they stick it, and maybe they did last year, if we decide we want to do it. But I thought it would be easier to do these and get our heads around this without having to have them tied to the cloud tax. If we want to raise revenue, we can look at the cloud tax or sports betting, since everyone's looking at that. Or we can make adjustments within the system that we saw today.
Now you're hitting too close to home.
Okay, you got it. Okay, Senator Hardy.
I believe I was next, but
I was just about to say, I think Senator McDonald.
Oh, McDonald. All right.
Madam Chair, perhaps I'm too competitive, but when I go to bat, my first thing I think of is not how to make the pitcher look good. And we're on the committee that raises money.
Right.
We have a challenge in this year and the next couple of years because we have a lot of federal money. And the advice from conservatives and Democrats and those who watch us over and over again is take the one-time money and spend it on things that need to be done.
Right.
Investments in, but not in ongoing spending. That has to be sustained with ongoing revenues. And I have watched, as you have, and I think members of this committee have watched in the last several decades, where the people at the top that used to pay corporate taxes and whatever have seen their tax obligations shrink, while working people and working families have seen their tax obligations grow. And every time we get one of these opportunities to make some adjustments, we tend to go in the direction that makes the gap even wider. So our job is to raise revenues, and I'm ready to do it. And I would be just as quick to say, use our one-time monies on capital expenditures and cash, and setting ourselves up for having our regular income do its best work in the next few years. So I'm not hesitant to try and get a base hit. And my goal is not to make the person trying to strike us out look good. So, thank you.
Okay. So anyway, committee, we're now running into Senator Hardy, and then I've got our next witnesses waiting
Okay.
for us. So
Well, just a couple things to add to this conversation. One is that on a sort of practical level, this bill S53, which as we all know, started off as that little tax about feminine hygiene products or menstrual products, has my name and Senators Pearson and Sorokin's name on it. And something tells me that the three of us wouldn't necessarily have introduced a bill with this in it. So I do want to just make sure that we're all comfortable, obviously, because we're also 3 members of the committee, comfortable with whatever is in this bill. That being said, I don't necessarily have big objections to a lot of them. I guess I want to wait to see what Graham's estimates are on the single sales factor, and that would have a big impact on my opinion of that. I'm not interested in looking like we're giving corporations tax breaks during the pandemic when so many people are suffering, and many corporations are not suffering. But I'm also wondering, one of the things that this bill does is look at the minimum taxes, but it doesn't look at the other brackets, the brackets for the actual non-minimum. And just looking in Title 32, maybe we could ask Graham for a little bit more information on the current status of those brackets, and whether, if we're trying to do a revenue neutral bill all within corporate taxes, we look at those as a possibility too, because this bill doesn't just talks about the minimum and not the rest of it. And I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about, we're saying that this apparently would benefit Vermont businesses, particularly manufacturing. And I actually think that's a good thing. There are manufacturing businesses that are struggling, and our state has seen a decline in manufacturing. And I think that that would be a good thing to try to help those businesses. I'd just like to understand more of that kind of impact.
Okay.
And I don't feel like we've gotten that yet.
So maybe we'll take a look at some of the folks that were there for the energy savings accounts, because those were some of the bigger manufacturing businesses in Vermont.
I guess I'm more interested in looking and hearing from the smaller ones that, are in all of our districts. I can reach out to a couple in my district. I don't know. Because the bigger ones are the ones that are doing probably okay. It's the small to mid-sized ones that are probably struggling more.
So maybe we will reach out. The House did hear from them, and we will try and get some of them in. Can we agree before we go on that we will deal with the cloud tax separately, if at all, but that this is enough to bite off for us? Or do we want to do the cloud tax as part of it? I'm not seeing anyone jumping for joy.
We would have to remove it, right? So I'm very comfortable removing it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess technically at the end, I think whatever we're going to do is going to be a strike all. So we'll just strike all that.
I don't have the aversion to it that you all do, but I've only been through it once. So I would be okay trying to move forward with it, but I also defer to you all if you have clearly strong feelings about it.
I don't know that I have an aversion, but I know that a lot of companies, newer startup companies in Vermont, have concerns about it. And it hasn't made it out of this committee yet, despite a couple of tries. So if we can deal with this, then we can deal with that. Senator McDonald.
I just want to be on the record of supporting the cloud tax. People that spend money on the cloud are more likely the folks who have been enjoying the tax cuts. And that's where spending is going. Just want to be on the record for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But I believe that all the tax preparers that service low income people may be getting wrapped into that. So I don't know that it's quite that clear. Okay, so let's move on. We have Bruce Fort who's an advisor to the Multi-State Tax Commission. Bruce, thank you for joining us. You've heard some of our discussion, I think, unless you figured out how to mute us. I figured out how to mute me, but not how to mute the rest of the committee. So talk to us.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Bruce Ford. I'm a senior counsel at the Multi-State Tax Commission. I have testified in front of your committee last year about this time, and have testified in front of a couple other joint committee, I think, in Vermont as well, all about this one bill. So I heard Senator Pearson suggest that he was really interested, are you trying to raise revenue here? Are you trying to make a more just system? And I think that there are some parts of this bill that really do create a more just system. And so that's why I think the MTC has been happy to talk about some of the technical aspects of the bill. And let me just go through those quickly. First of all, with respect to single sales factor, it has certainly been a trend. I did a quick look before coming on to talk with you all today. 25 states currently have single sales factor. 16 states now have at least 50% sales factor, including Vermont. And among your neighbors, Massachusetts and New York is now a single sales factor. As to the question whether it's actually going to affect economic development or not, I think I heard this morning some suggestion that it probably wouldn't. I think that that's correct. I just don't think it's a big enough change, and the state is, people who are decided to do a major business in Vermont have their own reasons to do it. Michael Mazeroff, who I don't know is testifying here today, has put in articles in written previously that corporate income tax accounts for about 0.5% of corporate expenditures. So it's just not, anything you do today is probably not going to be enough to move the needle in terms of economic development. But the discussion today, there'll be winners and losers. Generally speaking, in-state manufacturers benefit. Out-of-state manufacturers selling into Vermont will end up paying more, almost certainly, than they do now. And so there is that aspect to it. The MTC does not have an official position on it. We stuck with a 3-factor formula because it was part of our compact. We stuck with it for a long, long time. But one of our goals is to increase uniformity among the states. At this point, there is no particular uniformity, but the majority rule, again, 25 out of 40 states that have a corporate income tax, 43 states, 25 of those states are now single sales factor. In California, it was actually passed by voter referendum, an initiative by liberal groups that thought this would cause big corporations to pay more money to California. It didn't necessarily work out that way for them. And our economists about 4 years ago did a study saying that overall single sales factor actually reduces corporate revenues for any state that adopts it. So not a huge reduction, but overall there will be some reduction. So the MTC again does not have an official position on single sales factor versus 2-factor, 3-factor, and it really depends on what kind of industry you're looking at as to whether it's fair, whether it's a more just system, as Senator Pearson said. It really depends on the kind of business. So if you are a business that has outsourced virtually everything except for your software and your intellectual property, it may be a more fair system. And if you're a traditional manufacturer like Ford Motor Company, for instance, it may appear to be less fair. So again, the MTC does not have an official position. I want to turn now to the 80/20 company. This is the foreign operating companies. That's something that I have been pushing a lot in my capacity as just a tax nerd and knows a lot about this subject. And last year I testified in front of your committee and said that it would be a good reform. This was a carve out that never had much economic sense, never had much policy sense from the 1980s, and there's certainly no sense to it now. The idea was that corporations that are US corporations would have trouble tracking their foreign earnings, converting that to the US earnings. And that was always kind of a red herring, if you will, but in the days of modern computers and software systems, it just doesn't hold up. I actually did end up writing a 19-page article with 75 footnotes that no one has read, even my family, on 80/20 companies, saying this is why you ought to eliminate them. And I mentioned last year's Vermont bill as something that Vermont was considering. So 16 states have it. It is a tax shelter, if you will, that just doesn't, in my opinion, has no policy reason, no economic reason, and something I hope you can take another look at. The big issue, I think, for the bill is again, we're deep in the weeds here, and I apologize for that, but the difference between the Joyce and the Finnegan method of putting together a combined return. Vermont went to combined filing in 2007, I believe. They actually worked with the MTC at the time, and the MTC at the time felt there might be some constitutional concerns with the Finnegan method. There is a federal statute that says if all a company does is make sales into your state, they don't have nexus. Under the Finnegan method, all companies are included on the combined return, whether they have nexus or not under that federal statute, because the entire combined group is considered to be a single taxpayer in some sense. And so the MTC is neutral on Joyce versus Finnegan. We have both models up on our website, but I did prepare a long position paper trying to say that which is also on our website, www.mtc.gov. I did prepare a long position paper saying that the Finnegan method is just the more rational method. It's the more arithmetic, mathematical method, and that concerns about the interplay of Finnegan with this federal statute called Public Law 86-272 have turned out to be overblown. A number of court decisions since 2007, including one in New York that same year, have said we see no constitutional problem with the Finnegan method, and it's become accepted now. A majority of states that have adopted combined filing in the last 10 years have chosen to go the Finnegan method. There are ways that you can manipulate the current Joyce method. It's complicated, but I'm happy to explain it. There are ways you can manipulate it to make it so that if you set up an independent sales company, say for pharmaceuticals, you can claim that company has no nexus. The income might be included in the combined group, but the apportionment factors would not include the sales. So if you are considering going to a single sales factor, the choice between Joyce and Finnegan suddenly becomes much more important because that does affect the sales factor. So you can have some weird situations under the Joyce method where a large company has 2 or 3 smaller companies that are in the combined returns apportionment formula, but the big companies, it's in the it's in the denominator, but it's not in the Vermont numerator. I know, I apologize for being in the weeds on this, but it's a weedy topic. And so in any case, that is something that I hope the committee will consider. The MTC, as I say, is currently neutral on the matter. I'm not so neutral, but the MTC is, but we have a lot of materials on our website. So that's a big issue. And I think it is something which makes for a more just system. I don't think you can easily manipulate the Finnegan method as you can the Joyce method. Finally, the last corporate income tax piece is something called the Throwback Rule. And I don't think and the MTC does support the Throwback Rule as something that's been in our compact since 1967. It is to ensure that there can't be nowhere income by manipulation of nexus and things like that. If you are going to adopt the Finnegan method, because Finnegan treats the entire taxpaying group as if it's a single taxpayer, all the combined members, and some corporations have 1,000 separately incorporated entities. The Throwback Rule becomes a lot less significant. So although the MTC, it's in our compact, it's part of our blood. Should you choose to eliminate the Throwback Rule for whatever reason, I don't think it's going to have a major economic effect. So these are the same issues I talked about last year. I recognize some of the same faces. So Madam Chairman Cummings, that's all I have to say in a short thing, and I want to take any questions that you might have.
Committee questions. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fort, thanks for being with us today. You didn't touch on the minimum corporate taxes, and I'm wondering, I know that's a little dicier for you to do, maybe, but do you have an opinion on those?
No, I don't think so. The MTC focuses their attention on the Fortune 1000, if you will, and the minimum taxes aren't that significant. I will say federally, there has been an effort now to impose various minimum taxes. They go by different names. Part of it is GILTI, Global Intangible Low Tax Income. Another one is called BEAT, and Base Erosion Anti-Abuse Tax. So the federal government has used the minimum tax as a backstop for corporate income tax for some time. A relatively few states have a state minimum corporate tax that amounts to very much. But I thought the presentation this morning covered that pretty well. But no, the MPC doesn't have a position on that. We really do focus on the Fortune 1000, but there is a federal minimum tax. And I think federally that's considered an important backstop to prevent income shifting overseas and things like that. And it's become more important now with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. So that was part of the important reforms when they went to a territorial system. They felt like they did need a minimum tax on US income. And then of course you've heard about the OECD's efforts now to have a corporate minimum tax worldwide based on book income. And so that is a certainly an international trend and a federal trend. We may or may not be joining that with the Build Back Better bill, but it is certainly that. But the states have not jumped on it too much. I think some states have had some success with minimum taxes on pass-through entities, and that has been an important part of trying to get a handle on the pass-through entities that are doing business in their state and get some amount of that, because it's pretty difficult to tax the out-of-state owner of that pass-through entity, especially on capital gains and things like that. So a number of states have imposed minimum taxes on pass-through entities, but kept their corporate minimum tax pretty minimal, $50, $100, something like that. California took a big step, $700 minimum tax on pass-through entities, for instance. That was very controversial. So that is some aspect of that. But I don't think the commission has ever taken a serious look at should states have minimum taxes. I think it's just not been something we've focused on.
Okay. I wonder, it doesn't sound like, I don't think there's a lot of pass-through entities in Vermont, although I'm completely naive about that, so I'm not sure.
Although I think that as business organizations have changed and pass-through entities have become easier to operate, there are fewer and fewer limitations. Yes, you have plenty of pass-through entities
Okay.
Earning money in Vermont. It would show up not on your corporate income tax returns, but on if you either withholding statutes or on payments from non-residents when they get that income. But oh yes, they're there.
Okay.
In 1996, the Clinton administration adopted something called the check the box regulations. And it just basically said, if you meet the you don't have to meet corporate formalities of either LLC or partnership or limited liability company or any of that. You just check a box and decide whether you want to be taxed as a C corporation or pass that tax obligation through to your members. So that really opened up the world for pass-through entities. So they're there.
Okay. Well, maybe we should find out about that.
Yeah, we did some adjustment with them last year, I believe, in miscellaneous. It came down from the tax department. It was fairly complex wording but it was dealing with pass-throughs and making it a little easier to get things to figure out what was owed and what wasn't. But we can take definitely a closer look at those. We've got this one.
Madam Chairman, currently more business income is reported by pass-through entities than traditional C corporations.
Right.
So it's a big change.
Yes. Yeah, I think for years, C corps in this state have been diminishing. And, and part of it is just the nature of our business. So, committee questions? None? Okay. Thank you. That's been helpful. And we
Chairman,
will.
thank you for inviting me.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Okay, committee. We're gonna change horses in midstream here, and I don't know if Colin Reynolds has joined us yet. He's not scheduled for 6 minutes. Yeah, we've been playing musical chairs with people's schedules and trying to fit everybody in that has wanted to get mixed in. Senator Sorokin, you seem to have changed location.
I did. I took a quick flight to Ecuador, but my computer blew. I'm on my phone now.
All right, his phone is in
That's a
Ecuador.
different
We're
background.
waiting
That's
for our next witness, who is from Elmore Mountain Therapeutics. And we've been trying to get him in. He emailed and he had some thoughts about big business and the impact of corporations buying up the cannabis businesses in Vermont. And as we work our way through the tax, waiting for the bill, I thought it might be good to hear from somebody on the ground and how they perceive it. So we're kind of at ease. I don't think we've got enough time because he is scheduled for 3:45 and it's 3:41. He obviously doesn't know the fluidity of legislative schedules. Or more often than not. Senator McDonald.
Are we between moments here?
Yes, we are between moments.
Okay, I was asked at the caucus today to say what the committee was working on, and I deferred and did not try and list everything that we had been working on. But the chair of the Ed committee mentioned waiting, and I added that we had spent several days on waiting, and we're taking it seriously, and that we had been pretty much going through things that other senators sent us and trying to understand where we were going to go. So if if it suggested that the committee wasn't working its backsides off, I apologize.
Take a look at tomorrow's agenda. We are definitely working on waiting. And we have just now kind of stirred up the public interest I thought we would stir up with waiting. So we have a very full agenda tomorrow. And we're going to end with cemeteries, which might be a good way to end.
That's where I expect to end.
Perpetual care funds. The two big ones we've got this year is waiting. And I understand that Senator Hardy has just asked to have a committee bill drawn up. We will have to get permission and beg and cry to get it out of rules, but if leadership wants this to move, it will move. Senator Brock says, no, it's not going to move. So everybody be nice to Senator Brock. Maybe it'll come out. But that and the waiting, we'll make some decision on the whole corporate tax thing, yes, no, or whatever we decide to do. those are probably our two big ones to get out of here. And then we haven't gotten a lot. This timeshare thing is getting to be, that may turn out to be a lot bigger than originally thought, but, and that's how we're going to spend Thursday. So I did see Colin Reynolds appear. His name has appeared. Mr. Reynolds, are you there? There you are.
Yes, I am.
Okay, welcome to Senate Finance. And I'm going to have the committee. And committee, I don't know how to do this because well, Mr. Reynolds just moved, but Senator Hardy is in the top of my screen, so she can introduce herself. And I think I'll just have to call on you. So
Thank you, Madam
Ruth,
Chair. Hi, I'm Ruth Hardy. I'm a senator from Addison County.
and I'm going to go to Chris Bray.
Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Afternoon, sorry, a little time warp here. My name's Chris Bray. I'm the second senator from Addison County.
Senator McDonald.
Senator McDonald from Orange County. Welcome.
Senator Brock. Randy, you're muted.
Senator Randy Brock from Franklin County and part of Grand Isle County.
And Senator Sirotkin, who really isn't in Ecuador.
Well, I was going to say Michael Sirotkin, Quito County.
Okay, and I don't know if Senator Pearson, are
Yeah,
you with
I'm here.
us? Okay,
Yes. How do you do? Chris Pearson from Chittenden County.
okay, and I'm Ann Cummings from Washington County. Mr. Reynolds, we just ask you to introduce yourself for the record and then tell us about yourself and things that you think we should know. You sent a very intriguing email and I think the committee should hear from you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me. My name is Colin Reynolds. I live in Elmore, Vermont. My wife and I own Elmore Mountain Therapeutics, which is a hemp-based CBD company. Through our work as a hemp-based CBD company, Ashley was lucky enough to be granted a seat on the advisory committee to the Cannabis Control Board. And through this process, both she and I have recognized some pretty significant inequities in how this program is going to roll out. I have prepared an open letter to all Vermonters, which I attached to the email that I'd sent. I'm happy to read that to you today, unless others have already read it and it might be
It is I'm checking now. It is probably posted because I think I sent no, it is not posted. So if you can,
Senator Cummings, it is actually posted. If you refresh, you'll find it.
if I refresh, okay, I guess I haven't refreshed in the last hour. Okay, so it is posted on our website, but it would be helpful for you to just walk us through it. What's your concern?
Sure. Well, you know, the biggest concern that we're noting is this, I believe it's being dubbed the Kickstart, which is this program in which, or not really program, but element of the law in which the larger out-of-state interests that have purchased pre-existing medical cannabis facilities are getting a pretty significant advantage over regular Vermonters, regular local people who want to get involved.
Mr. Reynolds, can you get closer to your microphone?
Sure.
A little hard to hear you.
Okay. Is that any better?
It's a little better, yeah.
Okay, I can speak. I'll just really enunciate here. Excuse me. So what our biggest concern is what's being called this Kickstart, right? Where these larger companies that have purchased the existing medical cannabis licenses are getting some preferential treatment and get started, however, and the fact that these integrated licenses will be capped at the amount of the existing licenses that are already there, meaning no new enterprise can acquire an integrated license. Is this my understanding? This process, I mean, it just seems extremely unfair. I feel that we have a really large economic and agricultural opportunity on our hands for a lot that can benefit a lot of Vermonters and the state as a whole. And we're opting to give this huge opportunity away to larger out-of-state interests. It's going
Okay,
to compete
all right.
with the out of a new program like this, a licensing fees and the whole application process. Most folks are going to have to wait months, after these entities have already started to start to apply and get kind of wrapped up in all of this bureaucracy of a new program. I mean, a brand new application process for the state is going to be quite onerous. It's going to be very difficult. There's a lot of unknowns, and that's to be expected. But while your average individual who wants to get involved in this industry is going to be mired in that, these other larger companies are going to be miles ahead. And
So,
that is-
Mr. Reynolds, right now, the only integrated companies we have
Mhm.
are the medical marijuana, which, is that correct? They've been growing and manufacturing their own
that is
product. Okay.
correct.
And I guess we've heard at least one, but I think your testimony is saying more than one of these have been brought up by large businesses. And so rather than the small local pharmacy that I thought I had here, it is probably the entire business owned by a larger entity, perhaps located out of state. Is that what the concern is? And they get to start first, which means that if you wanted to grow, manufacture, and sell your products, you couldn't do that.
You could apply for licenses at different stages, and you could build yourself a vertically integrated organization by applying for multiple licenses and piecemealing the whole organization together. Whereas these existing entities have a one-stop, this license, as far as I understand it, is an automatic. They're going to have to pay the fee and, probably submit some type of paperwork, but there's no multiple applications. There's no waiting around. Like, they're ready to go.
Okay.
We convert an existing medical operation to an adult use operation well in advance of everyone else. And it's not fair. I'm not here to say that these entities didn't purchase their businesses legally and have every right to operate here in the state. It's just not a level playing field.
Okay. Committee. Questions at this level. I know we have a bill proposing that gross receipts tax, which was kind of spurred by the same feeling that we've been thinking we're going to have a state full of happy small producers. And it sounds like the potential for a couple of large producers to come in, perhaps buy from the small producers, but that we very likely have a couple of entities controlling the market in the state. And I think your concern, Mr. Reynolds, is they get one license, they're existing. I assume partially is we don't want to set, we had held the medical marijuana out for a while, but we don't want to have there be an interruption for people who have, a permit for medical marijuana. We want them to be able to get, or medical cannabis. I know I'm old. But that gives them a jump start. In order to get where they are, you will have to get a growers, a manufacturers. I don't know if you're going to want a testers, but you would have to get several licenses, which all take time. and all cost money. And I would assume probably add up to more money than their single license. Is that the base concern?
That is a component of it. You know,
Okay, what am I missing?
yeah, well, I mean, that's the bulk of it, I suppose. I just feel that these, you know, these larger scale producers that have come in, it's not a matter of that they could buy up these licenses, is that they have. They have. It is my understanding that all of the existing medical dispensary and cultivation licenses that exist in the state are currently purchased by large out-of-state entities, right? And there is a requirement that they're going to have to buy from small producers, but it's a, and if we allow an unlimited amount of small grow licenses, going to flood the market and ultimately create a very low value to this commodity, which will not benefit the small producer really at all. It's going to be very hard to sell product when everybody has it. It's a very low bar of entry just for the grower. So to say that we're going to have these unlimited licenses and champion the small producer when the real money is to be made at a further down the line, we're not really doing a service to anyone. And to understand that these individuals have come in and purchased these licenses for many, many millions of dollars. I'm not exactly the figure of them, but we're talking in the $20 million-ish range for these licenses. That ought to be an indication to how valuable these companies really see these licenses and how much money they stand to make. As I see it, you know, this kickstart is part of the law as written, as part of S54. I don't know at this point if there's a way we can take that element out of the law. The law has been passed, but is there a way that we could, you know, what I'm thinking about, is there a way that we can create some sort of taxation mechanism to at least slow some of that money from leaving the state and redistribute it to the smaller producers that would in turn help them compete with these entities? Or to really level the playing field, create a market that, or create a business space for them that is not terribly advantageous. I've heard rumors that one of the producers, as this rollout has taken so long and that they're now being asked to pay their licensing fees, they're considering just packing up shop and leaving altogether. You know, and I don't want to be terribly business unfriendly. I run a business myself, but at some point, you know, I think that Vermont owned businesses and local people in the state-run program. I mean, this is a state-run program. This is not a federal program. We can say and do whatever we want. We're going to be in violation of the federal law no matter what. So why do we have to follow some prescribed market structure that's been created by entities that do not have our residents' best interest in mind?
Okay, Senator Hardy, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to find the unmute button. My understanding is this is a temporary situation that's only for a couple months while things get up and running, to make sure that there's some tax revenue for the state so that we can pay for the whole operation, and that as soon as all the licenses get up and running, this problem will go away. Isn't that correct? Somebody who knows about it more. I mean, Senator Pearson, can you confirm that, or am I?
Well, that's the timeline. You know, I'm not sure Mr. Reynolds or others would agree the problem goes away, but you are right that there is a difference in timeline, and the current medical dispensaries go first and get a head start in that sense.
Okay. So maybe the problem won't go away, but there's this sort of lag time because of trying to get the market up and running to get it established before everybody can enter it. And there was some logic to that. I haven't been as directly involved, but do you think that after the other licensees are able to start participating, this will not be as big of an issue, Mr. Reynolds?
I do not. I feel to try to put it in terms that maybe we can all understand a little better. Let's take a look at our dairy industry, right? I know things are changing now, but we've had lots and lots of small farms that produce a commodity. And there's centralized processors. There's Cabot, there's Agrimark, there's places like this, right? They're not farmers themselves. They are, they rely on small farms to operate, but the bulk of the money to be made out of selling milk and milk products comes through these entities, right? These integrated licenses that we are just handing to out-of-state entrants is where the bulk of the money in this industry is to be made. And whether or not it's only a few months ahead of time is really neither here nor there. If there's only 5 of them that are going to be issued and they're all already given out, where do folks stand? For somebody to try to, put in their hard work and apply for the various licenses to build their own vertically integrated operation to fight upstream against these entities that just have a one-stop shop that was handed to them, that's very, very difficult. And the real control of the industry as a whole will, a state-run, state-specific industry as a whole, we've just given away to nobody that lives here. And that to me is the biggest problem. These licenses will be issued and individuals will start operating, they'll start growing, they'll have different pieces of the supply chain under control. All the infrastructure is here and people will start operating in little bits and pieces, but they're going to be reliant on these larger industries, these larger entities to some degree. And I just feel that we're really giving away a huge opportunity. I don't intend to participate in an adult use market. My business is in the hemp space and that's where so no real, I just feel that why would we give this, why would we allow this to happen?
Mr. Reynolds, have you been in contact with other senators?
I've spoken with our local representatives, both representatives and Senator Westman from Lamoille County.
Okay, because that's why Senator Westman brought us, we're the tax committee, so we can play with taxes. But the actual regulations were done in judiciary. And it might behoove you to drop your email to Senator Sears, or I believe it's Representative Grad, and tell them your concerns. I assume you've communicated these to the Cannabis Board.
Yes, and we've spoken with the Cannabis Board at length. My wife being on the advisory committee had fairly good access, and where we kind of ended up there was they're just the language as written, and that's we certainly. They know very well how we feel and how lots of other folks feel. And it's, my impression that their understanding is this is very unfair as well.
Okay. Senator, I saw Senator Pearson.
Anyone else? You've mentioned
I thought I saw some other hands.
Else that you?
Okay, Senator Pearson.
Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Reynolds, I had a long chat with your spouse, I think, right? Or on Monday, it was a good conversation. We covered a lot of the same ground. And I guess I would just offer that I agree with a lot of what you say. I actually like the concept that Senator Westman has brought forward around an attempt anyway to potentially equalize some of the cost to create some leveling at that end through the excise tax that will benefit small producers. But I would just offer a couple of things. we can create, as you've said, a market as we like in Vermont, because it is unique in that we don't sort of have the federal rules in place. But we have created these under the rules of capitalism. And we have tried very hard to democratize the market and make sure it is spread around. But there is no way that we can prevent money coming in and wealthy interests who are eager to get into this market doing that. And that is what we're seeing. And it's there's just simply no way around that. We have tried hard to ask that licenses be granted to people who we believe are truly in-state citizens, but that's pretty hard. And I would also just say that the snapshot you're presenting paints a picture that is compelling, but it's also true that the dispensaries went first in a way that was we put a lot of pressure on them. They were in fact formed as nonprofits. They spent years losing money. We asked them essentially through the program to go first and try. And they changed the culture such that we can have this conversation today. And I'm not saying that forgives everything. I'm not saying that we need to pay them back entirely. But the fact is they are an integrated entity. And the fact is, as we enter the recreational market, we wanted the potential to spread out the ownership and therefore the profit of the structure. And it was very difficult what do we say to the players that have not been earning a ton of money in the medical world and went years without earning money? What do you say to them? Because they were by the law integrated. That was the only way we allowed them to be established. It was a tricky riddle. And I'm not saying we got it right. I just want you to understand that there was a lot of thought that went into it, and it wasn't everything I want as somebody who worked on it. It wasn't everything that Senator Sears, another leader, wanted. It wasn't something Senator White wanted. Members of this committee, we all grappled with this. We had one of the bills vetoed by the governor. A lot went into this, and we can't overcome the fact that wealthy interests are going to want to play in this market. And we also had to wrestle with, how do you deal with the folks that have been here doing business for 15 years? In Arizona, they passed a law in November of 20, and they licensed every dispensary for recreational starting in January. And they just said, that's what we're going to do. It's quick, it's straightforward. They offered no opportunity to spread out the industry in that sense. We've tried hard to do that. I'm not sure we're there. I think it'll be an interesting year to see. But we have also tried really hard as we geared a lot of this to small growers to find a straightforward way for them to gain access to the market, because a lot of the goal was to bring illicit players into a legal regulated market. And absent some pressure on the system to be forced to buy product from the small growers, and which we did through the integrated, it was part of the package. It's hard to see how they get in and have any place to sell. So it's all I'm saying is I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but it is a product of years of compromise with 180 legislators and a governor in a capitalistic society that is, there is actually a limit of what we can control. And this is our best shot. I'm sure we have a lot to learn, and I'm sure we will be making tweaks. But I just want to offer that it's not with a blind eye towards a lot of the concerns you're saying, and it's just simply been a balancing act. And I hope that that you're some of what you're afraid of doesn't totally bear out, and I hope that some of what I'm afraid of doesn't bear out. And we'll have to look in about a year. We'll have a much better sense, and hopefully there's enough product and enough of demand that we will see farmers benefit very directly, and producers and people in between. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I wish we had a quick answer. This committee really hasn't been involved, except we're going to set the taxes and fees. But I think that does give us a heads up for things to watch. Again, I don't know at this point how we would change it, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it. Okay.
Okay.
So
well,
thank you.
Whoop.
We are going to work on your internet out there in Elmore, though.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, thank
Okay.
you all for your time. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, committee, that's it. Some of us, all of us, many of us have chairs meeting. Which I've got on at 4:15. I thought they moved it to 4:30 as a regular thing,
4:15.
but it's 4:15.
I think so. That's what I've got.
That's what popped up earlier, but the last I heard they must have moved today's back. Okay,